all of the spare parts distribution for all of GE Healthcare, and then went over to our software division and worked in industrial cybersecurity as well as pulling together all of the digital components of all of GE to form a $15 billion individual P&L for GE. And then 2.5 months ago, I joined HP. Got a call from a recruiter. I guess right day, I took the call, asked a few questions, and 3D printing is such an exciting industry that I ended up moving over after 17 years with GE, which was a pretty big movement when I wasn't even looking at leaving GE. So I'm happy to be here. Our journey in HP with 3D printing, they started working on 3D printers a few years ago around the multi-jet fusion platform, and we shipped our first product. It was around the springtime of 2017. So we haven't been shipping for very long, but already in that short period of time, we're the largest install base of plastic or polymer.
We are a family business.
To meet those needs. We do in Kenya. It's the ambition to become a global brand. At this point, we're at around 40 employees in Kenya, around 10 at our head office in Amsterdam. And it's about bringing mobility as a driver for macro and microeconomic growth. It has to be safe and reliable. So for Kibo, we launched our brand. The slogan is Go Do, because we feel that we need to help our customers, whether it's private use or whether it's business use, to be able to go do whatever it is that they need to do for their business and do it in a safe way. There's a lot of pride that I take in having set up this small enterprise in Kenya. As said, we launched it in May, so it's a little bit of a fragile time, I could say as well, especially looking at the political climate, knowing that the economy is on hold due to the election results of the August elections being nullified. But all in all, the potential is definitely there. It looks great. and I'm more than happy to share a little bit of the thoughts behind Kibo, the way forward for Kibo, and how that relates to technology and light manufacturing today. Thank you.
Can I suggest that you use microphones?
Okay,
That's
so it's
the-
a little hard to hear. Sure. Is that better? Perfect. We'll pass it. We have two amongst the four of us, so we'll pass it around. But I wanted to first, open it up, talk about kind of the global manufacturing competitiveness landscape. We all are, in it, breathing it. It's rapidly evolving, and so wanted to just get each of the panelists' perspectives on your particular subsector, your area of domain, how you see kind of the competitiveness landscape shifting, either in the last 2 to 3 years, and maybe a peek ahead around the corner for the next 2 to 3 years. Your thoughts and perspectives. Anyone care to start?
I can start. So you've heard a lot about this fourth industrial revolution, right? Where everyone's connected, everything's connected, and it's connected everywhere. So that's the start of it. But what we don't talk about a lot is that there's a $12 trillion industry market that is going to be disrupted. And that's one of the reasons why HP's going down this path around disruption. In that disruption, you're going to see a lot about AI, robotics. We talked about robotics earlier. Diane, there she is, asked about robotics earlier, and you're going to see all of that. Those are buzzwords right now, and I think you see people progressing. You probably saw the article about Google, and they have a game where they're actually their robot is learning from the other robot, and now it's beating it. So from machine learning, so all of that is going to come to fruition. And what we see is building out a complete ecosystem of partners to disrupt this. So I'd say short term, we'll continue down the path with a lot of our customers being in the prototype industry with 3D printing. We'll see a lot of them moving to production, but you're really going to see the disruption in probably 3 to 5 years. That's when I think it's going to go much bigger. And like I was saying earlier about material partners, 3D printing is all about materials, so costs have to come down. And that's one of the reasons why we have an open platform where anyone can come develop on our platform, but we go in with the highly we go in telling them that this market has to be a disruptor, and it can't be materials can't be super expensive. So that is sort of the notion that we go into the partnership with these different material companies. So I think that's going to be key for us in 3 to 5 years, is all of this comes together. We build out the ecosystem with the AI companies, with the SAPs, the ERP, and everyone to build out that complete ecosystem. And it can be anyone from, companies in developing markets or developing countries, or it could be somebody in the emerging countries.
Okay, from my side, probably what is most interesting for you to know is why we decided to go in and invest in the emerging countries with production and investment and so on. We did it because basically in our business we produce tractors and harvest machinery, so generally speaking agriculture machineries. I forgot to say that before. And in our business, in our industry, Europe and North America are the consolidated market that are not growing because they are replacement markets. While in the world there are big increasing markets, especially in the eastern part of the world. And that's why we decided to go and invest in China, India, Turkey. And we started first to go local, with a local to local approach, in the sense that we wanted to produce there in a way to offer our products to the local markets. This is the first phase of our, let's say, localization strategy. Secondly, once we've been managed to set up the production and start serving the local market, we have started buying back the products, so local to global, in the sense that producing local, for instance, in China, but exporting in other parts of the world, taking advantage of the low cost of production, obviously. And the third phase, that could be, let's say, they are all complementary phases in the sense you can add one to each other. The third one is the, let's say, global sourcing. So taking advantage of being there, having found suppliers, qualified suppliers, obviously. So using the suppliers not only for the local production, but also for the other plants we have elsewhere in the world. Taking advantage again of the production cost. But first, only I would like to underline that first priority for us has been always go and produce to serve the local markets. The reason why we decided to start producing in those countries, one obvious reason is the cost, because you cannot imagine to be competitive in China or in India with tractors produced in Germany or Italy, and you have to face the local competition of Chinese or Indian manufacturers. Secondly, in many countries there are also they try to protect the local economy, so there are heavy import duties. So the only way to be competitive is to produce there. So I think that for the time being, this is enough just to give a brief view of our competitive scenario in these developing countries.
Thanks. Yeah, I think for Kibo, looking at these buzzwords is sometimes it still feels like buzzwords. 3D printing, although I know a little bit about it, robotization, all these things. When you look at what we do, and if you look at our market, the price sensitivity that we see in these markets, I would say that for Kibo, when we look at localizing production, actually we look at doing that in a low-tech way first, as we move through different stages of growing the volumes of our sales. Now, just to give an example, we build a frame for the motorcycle that now comes from Spain, and it's done by a world-class producer, producing for all the big brands in the world. So the quality is definitely there. But if you look at what we're shipping, 90% of that is air, and then we have to invest for structures, et cetera, et cetera. So the logistics costs to just get these frames in Kenya is huge. Then, of course, there's import duties, et cetera. So the frame becomes a very expensive part. Now, looking at labor availability and looking at the fact that, you know, welding is not a very complex thing to do, we've actually completed a research into the options of doing that in Kenya. And that pans out to look pretty interesting. But, you know, we invested in working with a partner early stage, looking at the capabilities that we find in Kenya for welding, which means that robotization is at this point a no-go, even looking at the stability of, you know, the grid, electricity, but also the knowledge gap that's just not, you know, calibrating these robots for welding, it's not there. So to keep that up and running would be a huge challenge. It's exciting. I mean, it means we can localize some of the production. The tipping point for that is pretty low from a volume perspective, and we can increase our margins by doing it. So for Kibo, I see a step-by-step process of localizing the production on a part group by part group basis. Ideally, we bring in the suppliers that we have contracted early on and have selected with the story of our ambition to produce in Africa, and find willingness with them to set up a business locally in Kenya or other East African countries, whatever makes sense, to actually bring that expertise and that knowledge to the respective countries and be able to do a good business there, not only serve Kibo, but serve others as well.
Great. And to follow up on your point about Kibo's path forward, I know beforehand we talked a little bit about the sustainable mobility elements, and maybe if you could speak, I know it might be a few more years down the line, but what your aspirations are. I think it'd be good for the audience to hear a bit more about that.
Sure. So when I look at sustainability and when I look at Kibo, it is indeed, it's a long-term vision to achieve that. Ideally, we end up making vehicles that are designed in a circular way and also run free of emissions, meaning electric. Can be batteries, but could also be fuel cells or anything else. Quite agnostic to that technology at this point. We've started a research, or we're going to be starting a research in November, so in a couple of days from now, looking at the possibilities for electrification of motorcycle use in East Africa. Looking at not the next bike to come out, but the one after that to be flexible in the sense that we can either fit it with a combustion engine or an electric engine, so taking that into consideration for the design. Still, I think the cost element, it just has to make sense. So when we talk about research for something like this, we talk about infrastructure, even availability of electricity. If you're talking about sustainability, you should actually be looking at, okay, where does this energy come from? If we're going to be firing up a coal plant to get this electricity for those motorbikes, does that make sense? Then again, electricity, I think, when you talk about batteries and making safe and reliable mobility available to more people provides very interesting options, because you could think of swappable battery systems where you can look at financing a motorcycle where as the customer you pay off a small amount with each time that you swap the batteries. You actually come in for energy, but a financing scheme tied to that. So we look at all these things, and I'm quite confident that technology, especially on the communication side of things, will play a very important role in what we'll be doing. Also, we can provide motorcycles, but we can also provide mobility, looking at our customers, large fleet owners, a couple of hundreds of bikes, just guaranteeing them uptime for a fixed fee per bike per month. These are all things that to me relate to sustainable mobility. So environment, safety, and comfort.
Great. And you talked a lot about kind of the research element of your path forward, and kind of looking at R&D and aspects that are going to be vitally important in terms of entering into new markets. Francisco, I know that during our prior conversation, you mentioned not only does your production take place in China and India, but that you have a fair amount of technical competencies in some of those markets as well. Could you talk about the journey from not only moving manufacturing to some of these markets, but then also R&D?
Yeah, we don't have a general rule. We tend to adapt to the situation we find, in the sense that, for instance, in China, we started as a joint venture, and so there was already a company producing, developing, designing tractors. So once we got in and became a partner, we let flow the local know-how without trying to impose ourselves, in the sense that they knew the market, they knew the customers. What we only try to do from the R&D point of view is to bring our knowledge or our know-how in terms of improving the product, but always asking to the local R&D department if they agreed on that. Because of course, in a country like China, cost is of paramount importance. So it's easy to bring innovation, quality improvement, but if then you increase the cost, you are 5% higher than competition with the cost, you don't sell anymore. So this is it's very delicate. In India, for instance, has been different because we started from a greenfield, so there wasn't any tractor production. So we were forced to bring our own products and R&D there. And we did also mistakes, because at the beginning we brought a product that was overspecified for the market needs. We said, as many Western companies did, okay, we know how to make tractors. We teach to this guy how to make real modern updated tractors. And it was a mistake because there were other companies in India producing tractors with a lower quality than ours, with a lower spec than ours. But those specs and that quality was the one demanded by the market. And that's why it took us a few years then to change our strategy and bring a product that was much more lower spec than the first we introduced. So these are two examples of different approach on the R&D subject.
Great. And Michelle, you talked a lot about kind of the ecosystem that's required, whether it's to move into new markets or to build out, you know, the elements of your business. If you could talk a little bit about HP's perspectives in 3D printing as you're entering new markets and as you're building your ecosystem, if you could elaborate on that item.
Sure. So just our perspective is applications sort of is the tip of the spear for everything for HP's 3D printing. So finding those applications, what I mean by applications, like what is it that, you know, is out there that there's pain points? Are there instances where there's a lot of capabilities or performance that customers aren't getting out of their parts that we can actually give them in 3D printing? Is there a type of material that can't be used today but we could use with 3D printing to give more flexibility, more strength? And so that's where we start with the ecosystem. Then we look at the entire supply chain, from, I would say, even from, you know, ideation or design all the way through delivery to the customer. And we look at it from a larger consumer standpoint where individual personalized delivery, you know, it's what I want when I want it kind of mentality, as opposed to some, you know, a company ordering thousands and thousands. So you have both paths. And so we're looking at both of those paths as we're building out the ecosystem. And again, you know, we're not going to be the experts in ERP. We're not going to be the experts in with Deloitte. So Deloitte's a partner of ours in around digital transformation. So, which we announced probably like a month and a half ago. Our CEOs got together and said, this is something that we really want to do. You guys are the leaders in digital transformation with a lot of large companies, and so we're kind of folding in under and with Deloitte around 3D printing for this digital transformation. And again, it goes from design all the way through delivery, building out the partners that we need, and not necessarily saying it's exclusive with each of the partners, but creating that ecosystem that customers can choose from. We can say, here's what you need, and they can pick and choose. Maybe they already have a partnership with Oracle as opposed to SAP, but we're not going to be the ERP provider. We're just not going to do that, but we need to make sure it works together seamlessly, and so that's important to us. The other thing that I haven't mentioned is an open platform for software. So we have strategic partners around our software, which is like Siemens and SAP that I have mentioned. The open platform is opening our fence up to letting anyone develop on our system and around our system. So it's kind of like the Apple concept, where they only have a handful of apps that actually work on their phone. However, there's hundreds, thousands of different apps you can get, and so that's a concept that we're standing up right now, and we'll be launching within the next couple of months. I just want to open it up. It's not, you know, it's about a community here. It takes a village. None of us are going to do this on our own, and if we think that we're going to do it on our own, I think we're being silly and naive. So that's how I see it, and that's how HP sees it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Maybe if either of you can talk a little bit about your ecosystems and how those are evolving, either new customers, new segments, new suppliers that you're collaborating in a different way than you have before. If you could elaborate about your ecosystem and kind of the path forward, how that's shaping, transforming, where you think you are in the respective journey.
Technology is evolving faster and faster even in our business. You have mentioned before precision agriculture, and this is the strongest trend in our business in terms of technology development. So precision agriculture means digitalization into the farming world. And if you take this as an example of how we try to build up the future ecosystem in terms of the supply chain, I agree with Michel. In our business as well, we cannot do everything by ourselves. We need to find alliances, partnerships with the possibly best in classes, especially because there are really businesses that are for specialists, and we need to stay focused on our core business and try to find again these partnerships. And there are a few players in our business, in our industry, that try to do it by themselves, and they can afford it. I'm talking about, for instance, John Deere, that is the number one in our industry, and they can do it. And I think they have to do it, try to do it by themselves, because they are the pioneer. They have the financial resources. All the others, players like us, can count on those collaboration with companies that are not doing this kind of job only for our business, but also they sell the products to our business and other business. So they try to take advantage of economy of scale. This is a practical example about ecosystem in the new technology in our industry.
Looking at Kenya, maybe just two examples. One, from the supplier side, we look at the local production capacity and how it evolves constantly. We've seen some pretty good investments that were done in Kenya recently in machinery like CNC machinery, pipe bending, cutting, laser cutting, etc. The striking thing is that when you look at the way these production facilities are set up from just the layout perspective and people operating the machinery and the utilization part of it, it doesn't really make sense yet. So that really makes me wonder, and I thought of this during the presentation by Dr. Hausman this morning, that you can put machinery somewhere. He had these pictures with the cows and the plow behind it, and then I think the John Deere harvester, right? So I think we're at that stage in Kenya where yes, the investments are being made, but a lot of learning still has to be done. So to me, that is one example of how the environment is changing for the better. There's progress, but there's still a lot of progress to be made as well, and I think we can play a valuable role. On the other end, I think it's interesting to look at how the demands from our customers are changing. Whereas if you run a security company, for instance, and you have your guards out on motorcycles in a city like Nairobi, you're actually looking at operating expenses, and lower operating expenses are typically tied to electric vehicles in comparison to combustion engine vehicles because of the maintenance aspect. So I think the awareness and the comments that I get when I speak with our customers that manage large fleets is that yes, there's a very strong interest to drive that change, to be part of pilot projects, even where we look at setting up charging facilities at their premises. You're talking about riders that leave from these premises in the morning and then come back, maybe do 2 shifts. These bikes, they come back there, which is critical for electric. So I see a lot of positive change. The dynamics, they keep changing. The policy side of things, though, if I can also mention an area that I think raises a lot of concern, is not that dynamic. It's based on policies that I think are outdated. They don't really facilitate value addition in the country, pretty much the opposite by now because the market has outgrown the policies. Yep.
So I'm gonna key off of the last point that you made about change, because I think a common theme across each and every one of you is the kind of the implementation of large-scale change and how you've navigated and opened up in new markets. If you could, for those that are considering entering new markets, perhaps emerging markets, some lessons learned, kind of both on the opportunity side as well as the challenges side of making that journey.
So I'm going to give some examples from my past in industrial cybersecurity. So most of you know of cybersecurity on the enterprise side, like Target or banks or anything like that. So to go into a manufacturing facility and explain to a plant manager that they need to have industrial firewalls on each of their control systems, and they need to pay X amount of dollars to do it, is kind of like, yeah, it's like insurance, car insurance. You really don't want to pay for it, but you're happy that you get it when you're in a car accident, right? So we had that challenge of getting them to adopt cybersecurity. So we had to come up with different use cases, like what has happened to people who have gotten hacked. And this was really around the infrastructure. So infrastructure, the world's infrastructure, whether it's our power grid, and somebody can hack into our power grid and take parts of our country down, or whether it's contaminating our water. So it's a major deal. But getting a plant manager or manufacturing manager to understand that and really want to pay for it was definitely something that was hard to do. But it was a nascent market, right? You're going in and you're just trying to show the use cases and adoption. And that's what we had to end up doing, is showing them examples over and over with businesses who had been hacked into and the millions of dollars that they had lost from it. And we would actually go in and tap into their network and show all the different IP addresses that were on their network. It's like, so I'm from Missouri in the United States, and each state has a motto, and it's called, Missouri's motto is "Show Me State." Mm-hmm. So we had to show them, we had to prove to them that this was actually something really good to do, and that they were gonna be very glad by doing it. So that's one example. Today, it's adoption services. We're starting, I would call it the sandwich approach for 3D printing. We're starting with the higher ed, so universities. So you work from the bottom, students, teaching them how to design in 3D printing, getting them interested in developing research and development on materials, supply chain, getting them using the systems. So you start out at a bottom level, but that's going to take years because they're still in college, right? And we heard today that a lot of people want to hire people who have been out of college for 5 years, including myself. So you start at the bottom, and then you also are working the corporate. So you're sandwiching both sides together. And we just started this, so it's still yet to see, how it works, but I think it's going to work for us. And I think it can work in emerging markets as well in developing countries. So, oh wait, here you go. You want this one?
Sorry.
I know. I was gonna give it
In our case, what the opportunities for entering emerging markets, I mean, it's very different from industry to industry. I'm talking about our industry. And the opportunity are the volumes, the markets, and the growing markets. So, as I said before, the countries where the market is growing big time, and for us it's a big opportunity. And we have also always tried in the last 10 years to do it with somebody that is present in the territory, so with a partner, local partner, in a way to have a strong support from somebody that is local. I know sometimes could sound difficult to say, okay, but I mean, can you trust the partner? I have to split then the benefits of the investment we do. So basically, to answer these two questions, is trust the partner. Yes, of course, you have to carefully choose the one is the right one. But on the matter of splitting and then eventually profit somebody else, we think it's better splitting a profit than keeping a loss for yourself only. So and the local partner can help you in that. Not only because it can know the market, but also for the support it can give you in terms of the knowing the system. Like for instance in China, for us was a completely different world. And if we tried by ourselves in the like 10 years ago, we didn't succeed. Then suddenly with a local partner that knows the public administration, how to move and so on, it was much easier. Challenges probably is that in these countries not always you can find a proper high quality supplier network, so this can be a big challenge, of course, and therefore you need to do a localization, let's say, strategy where you start importing components from abroad, and then when the supply network is increasing their quality, you can then progressively localize it. This is one challenge I can think about.
For me, I look at opportunities as a lesson learned. That the approach we took for Kibo to do purpose design and build of the motorcycles was a good choice. It's I think in so many African markets people are used to have products be pushed into these markets that yes, in general they're an agricultural equipment, or yes they're a vehicle, or yes they're whatever they are, but somehow they don't really meet the needs of the users. And in the end you need something that sells at a right price point. So taking those things into consideration, listening to your market, to me would be a piece of advice if you're interested in moving into developing markets. It's probably true for any market, but that would be very relevant. On the flip side of that, it's interesting that, let's say, made in Africa or made in Kenya is not perceived to be a positive thing by the market per se. Whereas me personally, I'm very excited about it. I enjoy all the things we do, things that had not been done in Kenya before. But we chose an entrance strategy for the brand to come in as a quality brand, which it is, which means that there's a price point attached to it and a positioning in the market. If you then tell people, well, yeah, it's made in Kenya, then they're like, but isn't it supposed to be cheap? Right? It's made in Kenya. So the perception there is that, it can't be good. So from a communications perspective, yeah, maybe quite similar to made in China. But from a communications perspective, I think when you deal with B2C, even B2B customers, these things play a role.
Right. One item that came up when we all connected prior to this session was the issue of talent and talent playing a vital role in manufacturing and each and every one of your businesses and your growth forward. Recent research that we've done through the years around manufacturing competitiveness has indicated that talent is the #1 driver of manufacturing competitiveness, according to over 500 global manufacturing CEOs. So I definitely wanted to focus a moment or two on talent and get each of your perspectives in terms of attracting, retaining, and developing talent, both from the headquarters as well as you're moving into local markets, what your approach and strategies have been on that area.
All right, so this is my favorite area, talent. Attracting and developing and retaining. I think it's really important. It's something that I have a passion for personally within my career. My team typically goes to whatever job. I have kind of these teams that follow me, and we have a lot of fun, and so fun's part of it. So I think it's important, especially like 3D printing. Everybody's excited about it, but you have to be careful about who you bring into 3D printing. Do they have the background? Manufacturing experience is so key to 3D printing. especially, coming from HP, it's traditionally been a printer and a PC company. So infusing that manufacturing industrial experience, they do have, HP does have some industrial, manufacturing experience, but really bringing that outside view has been important to us. So I think attracting talent is pretty easy for 3D printing, but keeping them there and developing talent is equally important. Retaining, and I find that it's really about what they're interested in, and really knowing the individual, and are they interested in adjacencies? Do they want bubble assignments? Are there more things that motivate them outside of their job that you can bring into it? I have a theme called Making It Personal. And my theme with Making It Personal is with my employees and with my customers. So each and every person who works for me, I know their family, I ask about their family, and I try to make it personal. They're not just an employee number. And by bringing that sort of team approach, collaborating, it's truly a team. Sure, I'm leading the team, but everybody's opinion needs to be heard. We may not at all agree, but when we walk out of the room, we're all in line, and we're gonna communicate what we're doing. So I think leadership development is really important. And if you do the right things and you have fun and you find out what motivates them, you're gonna retain them. And again, 3D printing, I think it's easy to get the talent. It's keeping them motivated. The team that I have right now, they're so passionate about 3D printing. I think they work like 20 hours a day, and I'm not kidding. They work a lot, not because they have to, but it's because they want to. And they're very customer focused. My whole team's all about the customer. And so we keep bringing that back into the organization, and I'm behind them, supporting them. I've already, in the 2.5 months here, I've already promoted one person to an executive role. I felt like she wasn't, getting what she deserved from what I had seen in a short period of time, and then I expanded her assignments. So I could talk all day about leadership development, so we can always talk at the dinner tonight over a glass of wine, but it's definitely something I'm passionate about.
From my side, I must say that I think we are developing talents, nothing more, nothing less than also other good companies do, in the sense we try to fidelize good co-workers with multiple tools, as everybody uses, MBOs and other stuff. We try to, I'm saying nothing new, to push the growth inside the company rather than hire from outside the company. It's another way to fidelize our co-workers. So at the end, if there is a good team, good atmosphere from the top management down, this is the best way, I think, to keep good talent in-house. What we try to do if we go a little bit more specific on the developing countries, what we try to do on the developing countries is to give again good trust to the local people there. And we have had extremely good experience in all emerging countries. We've been Turkey, China, and India. We found great people, very smart engineer, as well as very good and passionate blue collars. But the people we send over, the expatriates, we try to choose the best one we have. So the best one we have in our headquarters in Italy or in Germany, we make special economic packages to send them in those countries where, of course, life is not so easy as it is in their home countries. Also because we have our factories usually in the middle of nowhere. It's not like big conglomerates or multinational that you have the offices in Shanghai, Beijing, or Mumbai or Delhi, but we are really sometimes in the middle of nowhere, so we need to find people that must be ready to spend 2, 3, 4 years with their families in these places. So we need really to motivate, and it's of paramount importance for us to choose the best ones. because the job is much more difficult there than in-house. This is something we try to do.
Thanks. Again, maybe two things. We look at, let's say, the assembly people doing the assembly on the line, like the skill sets available. I think still talent to me is a very interesting word in these contexts. When we talk about talent pool, it's also about, you know, the level and the extent to which those talents have been shaped and molded and have had an opportunity to grow. So from Kibo, that is looking at that talent pool. We look for the young and unpolished, the ones that are really excited to learn new things, and we provide them with opportunities to grow with the company. A specific example of that is that we also look at diversity from all angles. In a country like Kenya, you have to do with a lot of different tribes, for instance, so we like to mix that up. Even different nationalities. Of course, the gender balance is something that we look at a lot. We work with an organization called Safe Spaces that has done something quite amazing. They're a community of around 1,500 girls and women, and they're being trained to do work and develop skill sets in male-dominated industries. So we give some of these girls opportunities, and we actually, they're the best on the line that we have. They do a really great job. So I think in a country like Kenya, and probably lots of East African and other African countries, it's also about investing in your team. I echo the personal touch. When I arrive in Nairobi, I walk into the Kibo plant. First thing I do is walk onto the floor, talk to Victor, talk to whoever is there, and just, you know, see how they're doing, ask about their families. That sounds very familiar. And from a management perspective, I think culture is also something that you know, when you talk about investing in your team, you also want to retain them. It's about giving people a voice, and the culture that I find to be present in Kenya is one that requires a participatory approach to what you do, as sort of a consensus type of leadership. Involve all the stakeholders inside and outside the company, create openness, create trust, and that seems to work, at least for the few years that we've been setting up now. That works quite well. Finding properly shaped talent is very difficult. I mean, that's just incomparable to, let's say, here or US.
Mm-hmm. And I would even add to, from the talent perspective, our study shows that in the US and places like Japan, within manufacturing, that the skills gap is hugely acute, with 2 million jobs going unfilled in the US between 2015 and 2025. And your comment about gender, so it's near and dear to my heart as fellow automotive engineers, female engineers in the US. I'll speak to the US stats because I'm most specific, but women make up 47% of the workforce in the US, but in manufacturing, that percentage is closer to 27. So there's a 20-point gap, and so part of addressing the skills gap is addressing the gender gap, and diversity inclusion being such a important part. So I appreciated you bringing that up. I wanted to make sure that we left ample time for questions from the audience. So I wanted to open it up at this point to see if there's any questions.
Quiet group.
Yes. Oh, there we go.
So, Valakumi Sani from IFC. My question is regarding any examples that you may have come across from a policy perspective, from dealing with governments as you went through the exercise in Kenya and other countries, is there any advice with regards to improving the talent base there, but essentially from a business to government perspective, or any stories that we can learn from?
I have one. So I work. Okay, so I worked with the government in Ethiopia and let's see, Nigeria and China. And China, not necessarily around talent, but around trying to incorporate in specifically in Ethiopia and in China. What we found is our competitors were shipping in used repair parts, and there was policy saying that you couldn't do that, but our competitors were doing it, and we, we're from an integrity standpoint, we are not going to break the law. So I had to be persistent and work with the Chinese government over and over and over, and we finally got it to the point where, now we could be competitive because they opened it up and let us do that. But it took years to get there. It was persistence for sure. And then in Ethiopia, it was an incredible experience to work with the Ministry of Health, and they had a large what was it? A large percentage of infantile mortality. And so we were going in there helping them with ultrasounds, preventative care for pregnant females. We're also trying to bring in industry. We worked with not only the government, but we worked with Ethiopian Airlines from a private standpoint, just trying to incorporate there. And again, it was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had personally. I was part of a bigger team. There was probably 8 of us who went in there. And the semi-knockdowns, we worked with someone in our high-cost country, a plant, where they were assembling parts. And we would ship those over to Ethiopia unassembled and then train them to reassemble those. So we were working that angle as well as education. So again, it was a great experience, and we may have met. I was trying to find your name in my directory, but I left my last job, and that's when it was, and so I had to leave everything there. But those were some of the experiences that I had working with government that were just incredible. The Chinese one was definitely frustrating, but we got there being persistent. Ethiopia, it was incredible experience. So, anything else?
Was for you?
No, I'm
In our case, government is very important because agriculture worldwide is very much subsidized by governments. So if you don't produce in a few countries, as I was saying before, you don't access to the government financing scheme for the farmers to purchase tractors and agriculture machinery. That's why government is important, but you cannot work directly with governments. You have to take what they say as a rule, obviously. Different is a bottom-up approach with government, where in a few countries they are completely free countries where you need to do things by yourself without asking any help. In other countries like China, local governments is very active, and I must say they are very prepared people, talented people, the local politicians. They try really a lot to sustain and support the development of local industries. So, for instance, for China, we are having an extremely good experience with the local government in terms of supporting our investments.
Was the quality on the question on HR and government related, or?
Well, it can be HR or anything else.
Okay. Because I would be struggling with that one, so I'm happy that now it's a little bit more open. For Kenya, I think when we started off, and also looking at the industry that we're in, there's a bit of a perception that we have against the industry in general, as it's dominated by what's called in Swahili boda boda. It's just the motorcycle taxi industry, which is quite chaotic. At the same time, it's a huge driver for the economy. So there are huge benefits, but there are also huge costs to society of that. It's stigmatized in quite a negative way. And then if we look at the industry itself, we look at huge brands like Bajaj, for instance, from India, other Indian brands like TVS and their Chinese brands. And I think, you know, the lobby from the industry is very strong. These are multinational suppliers that, you know, they control this market. So when we came in and we tried to, let's say, get the government to level out the playing field a little bit, looking at that we're doing more value addition in Kenya than the rest, that has proven to be very difficult. Also, the policies that I mentioned just being outdated, even in comparison to what the government itself wants, looking at their Vision 2030, looking at a law that should have been passed in 2015 after the president approved it for it's called the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya law. It's not been implemented. So there's a lot of struggles that we have in our conversations with the government to actually help us out in leveling out that playing field. Lessons learned, I think, and I'm still hopeful. I don't know who asked that question. Oh, that was at dinner last night. You asked it, are you an optimist or a pessimist? And I'm definitely an optimist, and also in this one I believe that if we walk the talk and if we keep knocking on the doors, we eventually, of course also asking the right, like Kenya Association of Manufacturers, they're a strong group. They like us a lot, so finding the alliances, keep knocking on the doors, and try to have the conversations. I don't know whether it's worth anything, but at least that's what I look at.
I think there was another question.
I have a question for Kibo, please. My name is Yuntash. I'm coming from the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. You mentioned circularity, that but as a future objective for your company and product, apart from using the internal combustion engine right now, what are your challenges with respect to circularity in a developing country like Kenya, in your case? Thank you.
Thank you too. So now I wouldn't dare to call the approach that we're taking circular. If you look at the definition for that, but to at least be sustainable in the way we go about waste management and even life cycle of the product that we produce. There's sustainability just in durability, because there's opportunities for second life and third life use, and we really feel that even from our entrance strategy, it makes a lot of sense to buy back products that we sold to our customers at one point in time, to be able to sell them again, maintain them, and eventually when we get to that service provision model that I'm so eager to get to, we keep full control of the products. They remain ours, and it means that we're in the lead with disposing of the materials, recycling them. Another reason to be excited about doing all the steel work, for instance, locally, close to our market, close to our home, opportunities to control that. So I see it as an opportunity to ingrain it into the DNA of the company, of the people who work there, think about everything that you're sending out. It has to come back. It has to end up somewhere. And we set up processes for that. We contract local companies to come and pick up and recycle all the oil, for instance, when we do oil changes, all the chemicals, all these things. And I can say that I'm probably a little bit lucky that we're in Kenya for these sorts of things. It's relatively well developed, and so far that has not been a huge challenge for us. I hope that answers.
There's one question.
Ashley Sid from Solvay, specialty chemical company. Hearing your talk, I can hear that all three of you have a lot of experience in what we may call reverse innovation, taking a product from a developed country, strip down the specs, and make it cheap enough so that it goes into the emerging markets. Would you mind sharing your experience about what you have learned, how to do it correctly? Or maybe for the audience, it's more interesting, say, what are the errors you have done in the past you would advise us never make that kind of mistake to make it more efficient?
Shall I start by showing some mistakes? So it's actually interesting. I was sharing business cards that mine is from the head office, and actually it's called Connexi. It's not called Kibo, which is quite confusing, but it is what it is. Even if now you go onto the Connexi website, you'll find some things that are quite different from what you'll find on the Kibo website, and that's because of some learnings that we had. Originally, the idea was to not only do a motorcycle, but actually come up with an all-in-one solution for that group that I mentioned, the motorcycle taxis, the mass market. Trying to help them to professionalize, so then that package would include financing, it would include training, it would include gear and branding, just to basically help them set up as a proper taxi service. And the bike. We got into the same mistake I think that you did, where, you know, looking from a specs perspective and from a quality perspective, we tried to make it too nice. So a couple of things happened. One, the solution that we came up with was just leapfrogging from where the market was at that point. So for a Boda rider to understand that he should invest, and that being branded and being safe and being on a good motorbike is going to pay off in the end, that was just something they wouldn't see. So if they had to commit to a $3,500 loan that would take them 2.5 years to pay off, they were not going to go for it. So then we were confronted with the challenge of, or the question of, how are we going to go about it? Because we could still set it up with, let's say, a lower priced motorcycle, because in the end, that was the driver of the cost for them. We ended up pivoting in quite a big way, where we looked at, you know, all the core characteristics of the bike that we got to through a user-centered design process that looked at a vehicle for transportation purposes to be used very intensively, and looked at the market segmentation, and actually realized that this product, what we tried to do for the segment that we envisioned that we'd be serving, was wrong. So we stopped that. We stopped doing that. So we just repositioned the product. We stopped doing everything that related to the service model around it, which actually now, a little bit later, we spun off into a separate venture that is actually doing quite nicely, but they're not in Kibo bikes. But still, so some pretty good learnings, I think, from that respect, to just be very much aware of what your market is. What they need is one thing, but also what they can afford and what they're willing to afford, because even if you provide them with financing that makes it possible, it doesn't mean that they're going to go for it. Are some of the learnings, I think, yeah, that was a pretty big failure that somehow we fixed, and now it looks pretty good.
as I said before, just offer to the market what the market really wants and not what you suspect they want. So the market customer is the king, so just ask him what he wants and try to do it the cheapest way possible. Try not to think you are better, you are more evolved, you have better specs you should use, but give the basic. Then in our case, in our products, you can give a basic tractor, and then if you want the power steering, if you want more powerful hydraulic circuit, you can put it as an option. But give the basic really. This is what we have learned. And not, again, you need to serve the customer and do what the customer wants. That's it.
We're essentially going through that right now with 3D printing because all of the designs are based on injection molding. So how do you break it down and make it a drawing that's best for 3D printing? Because you know, injection molding, you have a lot of extra material you don't need when you 3D print. So that is a big deal. So we're going through that right now. The couple of things that I would emphasize, we used to do transfers all the time to low cost countries, from high cost countries to low cost countries, is just have a process, use the process, know the company or the country you're going into, make sure that you hold their hand, that they actually are not going alone, that you're partnering with them, truly partnering and not throwing it over the fence. I gave an example earlier. And then quality is number one. You can't compromise quality, so that partnership with the company is key. And sending your resources over there to help them if that's what it takes. Spend the money up front, do it right the first time, and I've learned from experience to do that, and then have regular operating rhythm with them just to make sure that they stay, you know, they keep the same quality and check it every so often. So I think that's the most important thing.
Great, and with that, I think we're coming due to a close. I want to thank the audience for your time, and definitely the panelists really appreciated all of your perspectives and your insights. If the audience could please join me in giving them a hand.
Very nice meeting you.
Unfortunately, I cannot make it, but tomorrow we'll be here.
Okay.
Bye. It was nice meeting you.
Yeah. If you ever plan on coming to Kenya,
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll give you my card. Drop me a line because still I think, you know, manufacturing, it's manufacturing.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's lots of similarities. Should I write Kibo on that? Because it doesn't say that.
Oh, yes. No problem. We have an importer in Kenya. We've been in Kenya commercially wise for many years, but we've just changed